Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Know the Faith, Defend the Faith. My name is William Hemsworth. It's great to be with you all again for today's episode. And I'm pleased to have my guest, Dr. Steven Christie. He's a physician specializing in oncologic radiology and body imaging. He is a diplomat of the American Board of Radiology. He's also an attorney and member of the Florida Bar. Aside from his medical and legal work, Dr. Christie also lectures regularly on Catholic social issues, particularly marriage, family, and the dignity of life. He and his wife live in the Miami area and are proud parents of 5 children. And Dr. Christie is the author of a great new book titled Speaking for the Unborn, 30-second pro-life rebuttals to pro-choice arguments. Dr. Christie, welcome to the program, and how are you doing today?
Very well. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, the absolute pleasure to have you on, and it's a very important topic that you wrote about. So I guess before we get started into the book, can you give us a little bit about your background? I noticed in the book that you spent 25 years on the pro-choice side. And so I think our listeners may find that kind of interesting, how you maybe made that transition as well.
Sure. So I'm a married Catholic man with 5 kids. Our last one is adopted. I'm a physician. I practice half of my life is doing cancer work and half of my life is doing GI work. I am usually tolerated by my wife, often loved by my kids, and disliked by my dogs. But I can tell you a little about my conversion story if it's of interest to you all.
Sure.
I grew up in a very secular, progressive household. I attended a very pricey, progressive, fancy high school. And in that school, it was understood that anyone who was educated or sophisticated and a thinker was clearly and obviously pro-choice. In fact, it was so obvious we never even asked why. And conversely, pro-life people like you, are you still there? Did I lose you?
Oh no, I'm here.
Okay, sorry. And pro-life people like you were clearly uneducated, non-thinking folks, which is a great irony. And even when I got to medical school, which was after law school, if you'd asked me why I was pro-choice, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. I might have thrown out a cliche, my body, my choice, or a personal attack. You're a misogynist, but I couldn't even articulate why I was pro-choice. And what changed me, I guess, in a word, was the truth. When you get to medical school, you actually study the facts about science, life, and embryology, and you hold embryos and fetuses in your hands. And as Shakespeare says, the truth will out, and that there's and I apologize for all these ringings that are going on here. I'm trying to silence these things here. That there's an actual definition of life. It's not a matter of philosophy or religion or politics. And what is alive is a purely scientific question that science has fully answered. And it's spelled out in every embryology book and every biology book used at nearly every medical school around the world. And there was actually a precise moment when I had this conversion from pro-choice to pro-life. I was in the anatomy lab, and there's a room off the anatomy lab that's sort of a storage area covered in dust. And in the corner of that room was a cabinet turned away from the wall. I walked around it, and on this sort of broken down old cabinet were shelves with jars on them. And in the jars were formaldehyde and babies in different stages of development, embryos and fetuses. And I was staring and staring and staring. And clearly these jars and this exhibit had been discarded years and years ago and hadn't been seen. And I became horrified at how irreverently they were being displayed. And so the next day I found our embryology professor, who was a wonderful teacher. And I confessed to her how affected I was by this irreverence and about how these babies were being treated. And that's the word I used, was babies. Mm-hmm. And the professor immediately grew angry and agitated and literally yelled at me. She said, "They're not babies. They were never babies. They were never alive. They're nothing more than fetuses and embryos." And again, Shakespeare shot into my head from Hamlet, "The lady doth protest too much." And we both looked at each other in silence. And I knew it at that moment. I knew the truth. And interestingly, I knew she knew the truth too. And that was the beginning of my change from pro-choice to pro-life. It hits you. The truth can hit you like a ton of bricks.
Wow. Yeah, I can't even imagine what that must have looked like. That's amazing. Now, Dr. Christie, in your book, you discuss, right at the beginning of the book, the 7, sorry if I get this wrong, 7 stages of personhood, if I have that right. Can you describe what those are?
These actually are the characteristics of life. It's part of the definition. We mentioned about that what is alive isn't a philosophical or religious or a political question. That is scientific question that science has answered. And there are criteria for something to be considered alive, and it's in every high school textbook, and there's 7 of them, and you could memorize them if you want. They're in the book. It's not that important that, whether something is capable of growth and development and metabolism and homeostasis and has a reproductive capacity, controls its own development, those things. You don't have to know exactly what they are, but you need to know that they exist, and that at conception, an embryo fulfills all these criteria and is a unique living human being. And that's really a critical definition for us to know, because when somebody says this is a clump of cells, we can say to them, hey, look, by definition, we're talking about a living human being. Let's get to the basic science here. And interestingly, there was a survey done in the last year and a half, which is fascinating. The largest survey ever done of its kind. Over 5,000 biologists at over 1,000 worldwide institutions were asked, does human life begin at conception? And a full 96% agreed with that statement, that human life begins at conception. And these were, that's funny, the pro-choice movement became very upset. They said this was clearly a biased study, and it was biased, but against the pro-life movement, because these same biologists in the study, they self-described themselves as 89% liberal, 85% pro-choice, and 63% non-religious. So I always say, let's please stick to the most basic scientific fact in the debate, and that's life begins at conception. That debate is a debate the pro-choice movement lost years and years ago.
Right, and it seems like they're still fighting against it. Doctor, in your book, obviously the book is titled, 30-second pro-life rebuttals. Why is that 30-second window so important for us to understand?
Well, I realized a long time ago that the pro-choice movement is unable to articulate. When you speak to people, it's almost always the case that they're unable to articulate their reasons why they're pro-choice, as was the case for me when I was pro-choice. But I also learned, sadly, that people in the pro-life movement have that same deficiency. They know that abortion is wrong, and that's wonderful to know. But if you ask them to explain why it's wrong, they fumble. So when I put this book together, I thought to myself, we have so many wonderful arguments. So my job was to organize, collect, compile, edit, and then put them into one source where you can present them in a user-friendly format, in a way you can actually bring them into discussions and debates. And I've learned if you can do it in 30 seconds, certainly less than a minute, you have a chance to win hearts and convert people. If you're fumbling around for 3 minutes in your discussion, you lose the power of your argument. So I found the 30-second general rule of thumb is what works. And if you have a real strong, pithy answer, you can really convert people in this world.
Absolutely. And you have a website that goes along with your book, speakingfortheunborn.com. Of course, your bio is there. You have various videos. You also have a teaching series there. Is there anything you want to mention to our listeners about this teaching series, maybe how it coincides with the book?
Sure. Speakingfortheunborn.org, it has lots of wonderful resources for people in the pro-life movement, and they're all free. So the teaching series arose from a live lecture that I give to people, and it provides everything you need to know really about abortion, so that you can help put an end to it. And it goes along with the book. You should watch the videos before you actually go to use the book, so you understand the background of what you're talking about. So it discusses the science in embryology. It discusses briefly the relevant constitutional law cases. It has animations of the 5 types of abortion procedures, not videos of the procedures themselves, but just animations by Dr. Anthony Levatino, a former abortionist, and they're deeply moving. It discusses Planned Parenthood, 5 facts about Planned Parenthood. It talks about strategies for participating in the pro-life movement. And maybe most importantly, it has both photos and videos of the unborn, of fetuses and embryos in different stages of development. And you can download these to your phone for free. I purchased the rights to these photos and videos. And you can, when somebody says to you, hey, that's just a clump of cells at 12 weeks, you can, instead of arguing, maybe sometimes it's better to let the babies speak for themselves and say, hey, do you mind me showing you a 12-week baby that you think is a clump of cells? And just show the picture. And these people are often moved to tears. And they say, wow, I had no idea. So it's wonderful having the truth on our side and having facts on our side and having science on our side. That's why I think this is a very exciting movement, because you can see the fruits of your labor very, very quickly when you're debating people.
Oh,
if
absolutely.
if you're armed, and that's what this book I think does.
Yeah, it is a great book and it's a great website. And I watched a few of those videos yesterday and they are deeply moving, as you said. Doctor, if we could, I wanted to go into a couple things that you said in the book. One thing you said is that we shouldn't use philosophical or religious arguments in the debate. And now, for the sake of our audience, why is that?
Sure. So this is a hotly contested issue, and my
Right.
wife was very active in the debate, sometimes disagrees with me. But I say when the vast majority of people you're speaking with and debating with on this issue are secular liberals who think that the religious are unsophisticated and unthinking and brainwashed and backwards and intolerant. So if you're debating a non-religious person on abortion and you've made 8 wonderful non-religious arguments for protecting the unborn, but then you happen to mention the word God or sanctity of life or sin or the Bible, well, you'll suddenly see the face of the person you're discussing with change dramatically. And you can read their mind. And they're saying something like this: "Oh, Steve, wow, I hadn't realized you're a freak. Have a nice day." And then all the non-religious, the wonderful, strong non-religious arguments you made just vanish. So I've learned that making a religious argument to a non-religious person is handing your opponent a huge club with which to beat you over the head. We have so many compelling non-religious arguments that powerfully explain why abortion is wrong, and I think we need to stick to them. Now, having said that, I'm a very Catholic man. I'm a wacky guy who goes to mass every day, and this doesn't mean we don't bring our faith into this effort. For me, my Catholic faith forms and informs everything that I do.
Right.
So a dear friend of mine, a priest, said to me, and he has a kind of a cute way of saying it. He said, we tend to rush out and make our arguments, but action is not the first thing we do. The first thing we do as religious people is we stop and we pray. And we look for insight and inspiration about how to proceed. Then after that, and he says he has a little formula. He says that's 50%. And then 35%, the next thing we do is we make sacrifices. During Lent, we don't eat meat on Fridays. Well, we have a long Catholic tradition, I happen to be Catholic, of offering it up, making a sacrifice on behalf of a cause or a person. We call that co-redemption, co-redeeming with Christ, where we get under that cross with Christ and help lift it for the burdens of the world. And so that's the second thing we do. You might want to not put sugar in your coffee that day. Offer that up for the person you're about to speak with or the radio interview you're about to have. Then that's your 85%, your prayer, your sacrifice, and then your last 15%, then go rush out now that you're prepared. And that's the action you take. So my faith is very important in this form of apostolate, but I don't use religious words with non-religious people. I found it's just handing them a club and they beat you over the head with it.
I totally understand how that could go. I have a couple friends of mine who are on the pro-choice side as well. And I remember when I first started having this conversation, I would use the religious terms and it was like a brick wall there. It was like immediately shut down. Conversation was done. So I totally get what you're saying there.
I'm sorry.
No, good.
I would say the other thing that I've learned that's really important is while the book is wonderful in giving you rebuttals and arguments to make, I think probably the most important thing you can do is decide why you are pro-life yourself and be able to articulate that. So in the book, I give what I call the 30-second summary of why I'm pro-life. It's what I put together for me, stealing from all sorts of people that smarter than I am in this movement. And that explains for me to anybody who might ask why I'm pro-life. And I think everybody should have this in the movement, either mine or their own, or make a version of mine that works for you, because the opportunity to defend the pro-life position is pretty common. It usually comes unexpectedly, and you might get only one chance to make your case. So you have to make it count. If you can be articulate, respectful, persuasive in less than a minute, you have a chance to really win hearts and minds. I can give you my summary if you want, or people can get it from the book.
If you could give it to us, that'd be great. Because I think some
Sure.
people may be wondering maybe what has to be included in there and so
Sure.
on. So I think hearing yours would be great.
So I say I'm pro-life because I'm pro-science, because there's overwhelming scientific consensus that life begins at conception. And I'm pro-life because social justice begins in the womb, because every living human being is entitled to the most fundamental human right, that being life itself, because being a burden on someone is never justification for killing them. And I'm pro-life because I'm pro-woman. Abortion degrades women, treating their fertility as a defect and enabling men to use and then exploit women at their most vulnerable. Abortion never empowers women, only the men who wish to exploit them. And I'm pro-life because I'm against violence, because abortion is not just immoral, but is an act of extreme violence against the most vulnerable. And I'm pro-life because of the visible evidence, because ultrasound and now MRI clearly show the world what's moving inside a woman's body. And that's a living baby. And lastly, I say I'm pro-life because of objective morality. If abortion is the killing of an unborn child, then it's immoral and cowardly to remain silent. And that's why I'm pro-life. And then I always say, and why aren't you? And invariably, the person I'm speaking with says the following, and that's what I used to say. And even when I was becoming pro-life, I would say as well. I would say because it's wrong, but I wanted to be able to articulate my position. So I spent the time to memorize this. So when somebody asks me, I can hit them hard, politely and kindly, but with real arguments that are hard to refute. So right. I think we all should, everybody in this movement needs to have their version of this. And you can use mine. It's on the website if you want to steal it. You can buy the book on Amazon, Speaking for the Unborn, or through the website, speakingfortheunborn.org. But I think it's a powerful thing to be able to give when asked.
Yeah, absolutely. And I noticed some key phrases in there, pro-science, pro-social justice, pro-woman. Why are phrases like that? I mean, I don't know if why are they so important to, I guess, introduce it,
first
like right off the bat?
First of all, they're facts. Second of all, we're using the language that they like to use. So when social justice is is an important cause for all human beings, and it's the language of the liberal progressive side of this movement. So I use the language. I also agree with them. I believe social justice is critically important for all human beings. I just think it extends to living human beings, to children in the womb as well. So I use the language that they would agree with. I agree that they're pro-woman. I'm also pro-woman. I agree that that we're all against violence, and that we follow the evidence and we follow morality. So I'm using their language, and I'm using it honestly, using facts and science. And sadly, the pro-choice movement survives on cliches and rhetorical deception and personal, or as we say, ad hominem attacks. And facts and science and truth outweigh those things always. So we have to be able to arm ourselves to present the truth. And one of the things that I've really focused in at the beginning of the book that I think is important is, so we're talking, you and I, about what are the words that we speak, and that's critically important. But just as important is we have to talk about where we speak these words and how we speak the words. So most of us are not Ben Shapiro out in stadiums on college campuses with microphones fighting it out. And most of us aren't legislators making laws or appellate court lawyers fighting it out in Supreme Court. But we all have a critical role to play. And that's in the ordinary course of our everyday lives with our families and our friends and our co-workers, one heart at a time. And that's where we speak. And the how we speak is I'm sure you know, and I'm guilty of this as well. When we get in these debates, we tend to get hot under the collar really quickly.
Right.
But we always have to remember to be charitable and kind and persuasive, articulate, clear, and brief. As we said, 30 seconds, I think is the right time frame. And always we have to be mindful that 25% of the women that we'll be speaking with have already had an abortion.
Yeah.
And they deserve our respect and our compassion, not our condemnation. And
Absolutely.
Speaking for myself, I can speak for myself, and I'm sure lots of your listeners, we have all made very big mistakes in our lives, things we would love to take back. And I'm sure many passion and respect. And then the last thing I sort of point out is, I say we're changing hearts and minds, and people say, well, that sounds great, but what does that actually mean? What does that sound like? And for me, I usually don't hear somebody say after I make my argument, wow, Steve, you're really impressive. I'm now pro-life. I mean, that'd be cool, but it usually doesn't work that way. But the words I'm always looking for are for somebody to say to me, Steve, that's interesting. I'd never really thought about it that way before. And to me, that's the sound of the heart opening to the truth. And I guess the last point I'd make on the strategy is that we need to have courage. As I told you before we started this little interview, my wife is pretty active in this pro-life movement, and she's got enough courage for all of us. She's tough as nails. I'm not that way. I'm happy to write a book and sort of disappear behind the curtain and not get out there in front of people like I am right now on this podcast here. But there are 62 million children who would like us to speak on their behalf, and we have to get out of our comfort zones and be courageous. And again, that doesn't mean picking up a microphone and going into a stadium, but that means you might have to speak to your mother-in-law or your younger sister who doesn't agree with you, or a coworker or a good friend. And so courage is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Christie, in your opinion, is the pro-life movement gaining ground with these arguments?
I think we're gaining tremendous ground for a couple of reasons. One, as we said, the truth will out, and science has changed. If you go back to Roe in 1973, ultrasound was in its early stages. They were very grainy images. So when you said that embryo or a fetus was alive and moving around, it was sort of a vague idea to understand that. Now we have literally windows into the uterus. Ultrasound and MRI clearly reveal to anyone who wants to see exactly what's moving. And if you go to the website speakingfortheunborn.org, look at an MRI of a 15-week or 20-week-old baby, and you will be shocked at how baby-like they are. These are living babies inside the uterus. So the advanced technology and our advanced understanding has really changed a lot. Also, the law is changing and catching up. We have a great case that's just gone before the Supreme Court that has addressed a lot of the issues you and I have talked about now. And many people are very optimistic that Roe is going to be overturned. I'm just smart enough at my age now to know that I have no idea what's going to happen, and I'd be an idiot to predict. But I think it's reasonable at least to be optimistic that Roe will be overturned. And I think the last thing is that the pro-choice movement has become so radical that it's turned off the moderates in this world. The most recent polling says between 71% and 75% people in this country of all persuasions agree that abortion after 12 weeks should be stopped. The pro-choice leaders have no idea what the overall population believes in, and they believe in radicalizing abortion until birth. When the New York legislature codified abortion until birth, the legislature erupted in cheers as though this is a wonderful thing. We're now supposed to shout our abortion. Back in 1992, Bill Clinton said abortion should be safe, legal, and rare, acknowledging the seriousness and the sadness that abortion entails. Now, the mantra of the pro-choice leaders is, for free at any time and for any reason. So I think that's another reason to be optimistic, that the pro-choice movement has radicalized themselves so they're out of touch even with their own people.
Great. Now, this book came out in February. What feedback have you received so far?
I've been very, very fortunate. And I guess the first thing I should say, I keep saying I this, I that. In many ways, I'm an editor of this book only. I've collected the arguments of real wonderful leaders in the pro-life movement. So I've edited and compiled their stuff. Some of the stuff is original and new, but I really want to give credit to all the people the shoulders that I've been standing on putting this book together. The book is selling very well. Right now it's into its second printing. We're hoping for perhaps a second edition even after the Dobbs decision comes out in June. The website is, which again is free, speakingfortheunborn.org, is available to anybody who wants to go to it. And so we're very excited. We're trying to now get this into high schools. I give these talks that are on the website, I give them live to parishes, and we're getting good traction with people right now. So if anybody has any great ideas on how to get into more school environments and to pass this message on, you can reach me through the website, and I'm open to all sorts of ideas.
Again, that website, speakingfortheunborn.org, a really fantastic website. And Dr. Christie, one other question: where can our listeners get the book?
The book is on Amazon, Speaking for the Unborn. You can also get it on the website of the publisher, St. Paul Center, or there are links to it through the website as well, speakingfortheunborn.org. And if you get it, I always say, if you get on Amazon and you like the book, please leave a 5-star review. It helps. And if you don't like the book, please leave a 5-star review. That helps. Thanks.
Well, Dr. Christie, thank you for your time today, and thank you for the great work you're doing out there. God bless you.
A great privilege to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.